Oh, there she is. Hi, Annie.
Hi, good morning. How's everybody?
Good.
Good, thanks.
Okay.
Glad to have you. We're a bit
Yes.
worried you were stuck
I
in
was
deep
stuck in the
space
waiting
somewhere.
room. Yeah, in the waiting room.
It's so weird because we were able to let Sylvia in.
And now I will be able to share my screen. I can see the button, so it's perfect.
All right, so 2 minutes, then I can let everybody in. I don't see Amanda yet, so.
And how many registered people do you have, Eva?
Let me check. I think it was quite a lot last time I looked, but I completely forgot, to be honest. Yeah, 148.
Very good.
Just for registration, but yeah.
Usually about maybe
Half.
60% will show up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. We have 18 in the lobby so far, so.
That's great. You don't have problems with Teams with such a large attendance?
We just have problems with Team all the time. So in the future, we'll be using Zoom. I've convinced our office to let us do that instead. It's because, like with the UN, sometimes it's so hard to pay for things when you already have something else. But we have had so much problem with it. So it's just, yeah, nothing else to do than to use Zoom and pay for that. Okay, I think I can let everyone in now.
Okay, great.
Great.
Yeah, Marie, I think we can probably get started, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think some folks are still joining. But good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you're joining from. My name is Damien Suss. I'm with the United Nations Office of the High Representative for the Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States. Welcome to this webinar where we'll be discussing a newly launched report entitled Effective Public-Private Community Partnerships in Tourism for the Inclusive and Sustainable Development of Small Island Developing States. I want to start by thanking all of the partners who've made the report possible. The Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility, which funded the reports, and we received a lot of substantive inputs as well from the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Pacific Tourism Organization, as well as the African Sustainable Tourism Organization, and the UN Tourism Organization. I'd like to note that the report was developed as part of preparations for the SIDS Global Business Network Forum, which was held in Antigua and Barbuda this past May. The forum, as probably many of you know, was a special event of the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States. If you'd like to catch up on the forum in more detail, I do encourage you to visit the forum website. My colleague Eva Marie can drop a link in the chat. You'll find on the website a summary of the discussions at the forum, including recommendations that were made by the private sector on some of the priority areas to support implementation of the new Antigua and Barbuda Agenda for SIDS, which is the new program of action for small island developing states over the coming decade. Before I hand over to our speakers, I just want to give you a quick recap of the agenda. We'll first hear opening remarks from Dr. Sylvia Donnert, Executive Director of the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility. We'll then move to a presentation of the report by Ms. Annie Bertrand. Annie is a partnership expert and the main author of the report. And then, should time allow, we'll also invite questions from participants before we close with remarks from Ms. Amanda Charles, Sustainable Tourism Expert at the Caribbean Tourism Organization. So without further ado, I now have the pleasure to invite Dr. Sylvia Donnert to provide opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you, Eva, Annie, Amanda. I'm so glad to be here to welcome you all today. I see a lot of people that I know in the audience as well that have been related to Compete Caribbean in some way or another. Also, a lot of people that I don't know, which is great, which means, you know, that there's a lot of interest in this report, and I'm very grateful for that. So I'm not going to repeat Damien's remarks, you know, about the financing of the report. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what was Compete Caribbean interest in a report such as this one. No, first of all, to give a little bit of a background, Compete Caribbean is a program that is focused on helping 13 countries in the Caribbean develop their private sector through technical assistance. And one of the areas that we kind of like stumbled upon many years ago was this issue of what are new models in tourism that are more inclusive and that give a lot of benefits to the communities, no? And the way that we stumbled upon this model is that we are sector agnostic, and we were doing these calls for businesses in whatever sector that wanted to collaborate on a common project that would achieve either a growth in exports or a growth in their businesses. And this was back in 2013. And we ended up getting some applications that were very interested in Guyana, in Jamaica, about businesses that wanted to work together with the community to do develop some products that involve the communities in experiential tourism. So we ended up financing those projects, and we found that they had a lot of benefits that we hadn't expected before. So this was between 2013, 2017. And then when the current phase of Compete Caribbean started in 2017, we were approached by the Caribbean Tourism Organization to say, you know, we've seen these community-based tourism projects that we found very interesting. Why don't we develop together a model? And so we developed a model of community-based tourism. It's a toolkit that you can find at the Caribbean Tourism Organization's website. We worked with the Caribbean Tourism Organization to disseminate the model in the Caribbean region. And then we worked together with them to issue a call for proposals of community-based tourism that we would fund, and that would be supervised by the Caribbean Tourism Organization. And we're financing 3 of them that are, you know, on the way to completion in Belize, Dominica, and the Bahamas, 2 of which involve indigenous people. So anyhow, when UNDP was interested in preparing for this SIDS conference, in the topic of public-private partnerships, we thought, well, we're interested in finding out, aside from this, first of all, to get kind of like a more objective view of this community-based tourism model, and second, to see, how does it fare with other models of public-private partnerships in terms of developing the tourism sector. And this was our interest in financing this work. We're very glad that Annie Bertrand took the mantle of developing this framework, and very proud of this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Donert, and I thank you also for the partnership with ourselves, with our office, and all of the other partners who made this report possible. It's a really substantive piece of work, and I think it will add a lot of value to this discussion as well on empowering communities to leverage sustainable tourism. So without further ado, we're going to actually now hand over to Ms. Annie Bertrand to present the findings of the report. Annie, over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Damien. I have only one screen, so I'm gonna have everybody okay, now you cannot see it. Let me see. Okay, now you can see the screen, the slides show?
Yes, I can see it on my side.
Okay, wonderful. Excellent. So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Damien and Sylvia. It's a great pleasure to present these results finding to you. I just want to acknowledge that Jordan Hamilton, he's the research analyst on this report. He worked closely with me, and I want to acknowledge his presence today, and he will be joining us at the end for the Q&A session. So without further ado, page down. Okay, there we go. No. Okay, first of all, I just wanted to highlight or emphasize why focusing on public-private community partnerships, when in fact, most of us are really familiar with the standard public-private partnership, the 3 Ps in development. But in the case of tourism, it is really critical that that we also engage communities as equal partners if we're serious about sustainable development. So we launched this call for case studies around 56 SIDS across the world, and 3 case studies were developed in full detail, 1 for each main region, and 20 success stories were captured in the report. So all these efforts enabled us to identify ultimately 16 drivers of success along 6 dimensions that stakeholders can use to optimize value for communities. And that is the public-private community partnership framework that I'll be sharing a little bit later on. So all these research findings are available in the report. I will encourage Eva or someone else to put the link to the report in the chat. And I also encourage everybody to put your write your questions in the chat as I move forward, so that you can so we can address them later on. Moving on. Okay, so now first of all, the context. So before the pandemic, SIDS experienced phenomenal growth in tourism arrivals and expenditure, but the impact on inclusive and sustainable development is actually a little bit more unclear, because during the same period, the growth in economic and human development indicators in SIDS is slower and even declining in some countries. So obviously there are many factors that explain the differences in the growth rates between arrivals and the other indicators. So some of these factors affecting these differences are explained in the report, but one of the main issue is that the benefits of tourism do not seem to reach micro, small, and medium enterprises and local communities equitably. So small businesses, which in fact in the Caribbean, small businesses, MSMEs, represent 90% of all firms in the private sector, and because it also includes the informal sector. So they really struggle to integrate the tourism value chain in small and developing states. So think about it, 70 to 90% of MSMEs do not use digital payment to process transactions as we speak. If you do live in a SID, you'll know that some international processors like PayPal or Stripe, or even international platform like Airbnbs, are not readily integrated across all bank accounts or across all credit union accounts. So they're not necessarily accessible to most individuals. So the question is, how on earth can MSMEs join the tourism value chain when we know that visitors prefer to pay using credit cards or paying online or even paying with cards when they are in person? So what do the small businesses do? They sell their experiences using tour operators or cruise lines. So, but there was this study conducted by Duke University on the tourism value chain in St. Lucia involving the cruise sector. And they found that 70% of the price that visitors pay for excursions onshore goes to the cruise line company. So obviously it is difficult to think that the MSMEs are really truly benefiting equitably in this case. But fortunately, there is an opportunity. There is the movement towards sustainable and regenerative tourism. And this movement, the COVID pandemic actually made this movement even stronger. So on the consumer side, we have data in the report to illustrate that there is an increased demand for responsible and adventure travel. So you can actually have the data in the report. Institutions also are increasingly committed to establish the enabling environment that would allow MSMEs to integrate the tourism value chain much more easily. And then from the private sector, we also have ample evidence to illustrate that private sector companies are also interested in addressing social issues. So how can we take advantage of this opportunity and address the problem? Well, through public-private community partnerships. So this is the framework I was talking about that illustrates 16 drivers of impact on 6 main dimensions. So most of you are, used to the 3 standard, impact areas like social impact, environmental impact, economic impact. But what we found by studying tourism in small island developing states is that it is also critical to focus on digital inclusion and innovation. We must also develop partnerships that strengthen governance and financing, as well as resilience, given the vulnerabilities of small island developing states. So today I'm going to share with you some success story that illustrates those drivers of success. Obviously, the report has a lot more, so today will be just a brief overview, starting with the social empowerment dimension. So this is really about diversifying tourism products and experiences to empower women, youth, and vulnerable groups. So the example here is from Treasure Beach, which was a small fishing communities in the south of Jamaica. And in 2014, the community tourism became evidently an opportunity for fisher folks to generate alternative sources of revenues because essentially there were no more fish in the water. But at that time, 90% of local businesses were operating informally, and there was a lack of trust between community and formal businesses already operating. And obviously, there was important needs for social services. So a public-private community partnership was established involving a cluster initiative that was actually funded by Compete Caribbean at the time. And the focus was really to develop authentic experiences, new products using local MSMEs that would be more aligned with the willingness to pay of visitors to increase the value generated, but without losing the authenticity of the community. And so that product market fit was conducted and several experiences were developed, new experiences. Meanwhile, the community also started, the cluster stakeholders also started to invest in social areas, including investment in a sport facility that also included opportunity to provide training to community stakeholders. And the women's group, interestingly, used visiting doctors to the community to organize mobile clinic. And that was, this cluster initiative was a huge success. A few years later, this mobile clinic became a permanent health clinic. Sports tourism was developed. And what's also interesting is that the cluster initiative formalized officially into a destination management organizations at the grassroots level. And if you look in the report, the case study on this community, you will find that they're still highly active today, still focusing on addressing some issues that would benefit the entire community. So I really encourage you to go read this story because it's really a tremendous success. So 100%, 150 increase in employment, revenues, and also the community managed to attract large investment from the government, including highways and roads that would increase access to this region. But unfortunately, the Hurricane Beryl damaged this community tremendously. I believe they still don't have any access to utility as we speak, nor electricity. I invited the stakeholders to join this event if they could, because it would be interesting for us to hear their perspective on how the success of this initiative, and see also how is Treasure Beach doing at the moment. Do we have anybody online from the community? Okay, then. So we'll move on. Unfortunately, it would have been nice to hear from them. So
I mean, if someone is there, maybe they should chat, because I think people don't have speaking rights. So they
okay,
should
so
put it in the
raising
chat so I can, or raise their hand.
Okay, great. Thank you, Eva. So in that case, we'll move on. And please, if there is any issue, just let me know, because I only have one screen. Unfortunately, so I cannot see if there are any hand raised. So moving on to the second dimension about digital inclusion and innovation. So this is about enabling MSMEs in the formal and informal sectors to access tourism market digitally, both online and in person, and profitably. So here we have examples from the Pacific Islands. So in 2012, Pacific Trade Invest Australia wanted to support responsible and sustainable tourism in Pacific.
I'm sorry, but someone apparently raised their hands. I just don't see it, but they posted it in the chat. Miss Allen?
Are you able to let her speak? If she's from, I guess she's from Treasure Beach. You wanted to say something from?
Yes, so I don't see anyone actually raising the hand, but let me see if I can find. I'm gonna give her speaking rights now to see if she wants to say something. Macy, you want to speak? Did you raise your hand? Okay, so maybe not. I'm sorry, Annie.
No problem, no problem. So yeah, I was talking about Pacific Trade Invest Australia. They wanted to support sustainable and responsible tourism in Pacific SIDS. And what they realized that they needed to do was really to establish a digital tourism program. And they established public-private community partnerships and of all sorts to involve the different stakeholders and make this possible. And the results were also super interesting. So ultimately, they enabled 300 MSMEs to have access to a transactional website where they could transact, and $20 million were generated via this program. So it was a very interesting, it's a very interesting success story, and they have moved on and add additional partnership now where they work with the tourism organization on the ground to identify community organizations that would benefit from this program. So do we have, I don't think we have people from there, because our last webinar we had people from there explaining the additional partnership developed, but I believe it's way too late at the moment for them. So there's another example I wanted to highlight.
We do have Macy. I see her now. She just has to unmute herself. You're still on mute, Macy. You have to unmute yourself.
Right, can you hear me now?
Yes,
you can.
Great.
Okay. Hi Sylvia, and everybody else. But I know Sylvia.
Hi, Macy.
Hi, I led the project, the Olympic Caribbean project, for Treasure Beach, and provided a lot of the information that actually came into your report, Annie. I was in Treasure Beach the day before Beryl actually hit, and I had to leave. And unfortunately, Beryl devastated the place. So I'm very, I'm still emotional about it, actually. And I'm still very much in contact with the people there because I've made very good friends, and I'm working on another project there at the moment. What I would like to say is that the DMO really came into itself with Beryl. to help the other NGOs and help the community. And the resilience you talked about that is needed there certainly, showed itself when how the community came together to help each other to get to after the aftermath of Beryl.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your insights. And if you can please stick around. So if people have questions at the end, it would be very interesting if you can stay so you can address them. Thank you very much for your insights. And sorry to hear the situation in Treasure Beach. Okay, so moving on, I was in the second dimension related to digital inclusion and innovation, and I wanted to share a second example briefly in Solomon Islands. Solomon, there are 750,000 people living across 300 islands. Obviously, most of them are unbanked or underbanked because most financial institutions are located in the capital. So the main telecommunication company there has launched MCLN mobile wallet. And the model was super interesting how they partner with the local communities. They use individuals across the different islands that were well trusted in their community. And they use these individuals, they train these individuals to really mobilize communities. And within 9 months, 25,000 mobile wallets were activated. And what's most interesting for us in tourism is that now visitors who are coming to Solomon Islands, they can simply use their passport to download their mobile wallet and load the wallet with their credit cards. And now they can use their mobile phone across the different islands and simply sell, buy and pay using their mobile phone. So all street vendors, souvenirs, anybody can benefit from this initiative. So it's a huge success. And I don't know if we have my colleague there from, I guess it's perhaps late over there, but he could have provided an update on how this program has actually reached even further individuals. So moving on to governance and financing, which is really using public-private community partnerships to attract funds, technical assistance, and ensure good governance. So here is an example from Grenada. So in 2012, there was a decline in tourism arrivals since 2008, and the Grenada Hotel and Tourism Association actually conducted a survey among their members, which 80% of them very small, a majority of them very small and locally owned. They found that 80% of them would actually close down if the situation was not addressed. So the private sector applied for funding and developed a cluster initiative with support of Compete Caribbean again. And the cluster initiative really at this time was focused on developing a national brand for the country, but also support helping the MSMEs to market the products and services. And this is how the Pure Grenada brand came about. And if you look at the report, you'll find, how difficult it was initially to really mobilize the different stakeholders that have different perspective on where the way forward. But they really managed to establish together a national brand that is now well anchored into the Grenada Tourism Authority. And the results, again, were super inspiring. Huge increase in tourism arrivals following the cluster initiative, the massive marketing globally. And if you compare in the report, you will see the comparison to similar to other islands in the area, which also experienced high growth during the same period, but in a much lower proportion. So it's very interesting to notice. Now, moving on to the fourth dimension related to environment and biodiversity. This is really about using public-private community partnership to engage communities in protection, conservation, and also regeneration. And we have here an amazing example from the Bahamas Reef Rescue Network. In 2020, obviously, different stakeholders were trying different approaches to stop the coral reefs from dying. But really what perhaps made the biggest difference in the situation is the cluster initiative, again, that was established via public-private community partnership involving to develop tourism, regenerative tourism products. So, but this idea of, planting fragments of coral reef is a very fragile process and it's a very technical one. So it was really important to partner with scientists that can provide the proper training to the different tourism operators. And that's exactly what they did. And it was, again, a huge success. I believe we have on the line Hailey. Hailey, it would be great if we can hear from you about the success of this initiative. Can you unmute yourself, or Eva, can you unmute Hailey?
I gave her speaking rights. She will have to unmute herself.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, thank you. Great. Go ahead.
Hi. Yeah. So I led the initiative with the Compete Caribbean funding for the Reef Rescue Network, and yeah, it was just a huge success. I'm just looking at the results there, and those numbers have even already dramatically increased. We've actually nearly planted 10,000 nursery fragments, reared fragments back onto reefs now, and the cluster just continues to grow. We've since had about 12 new dive shops join. Instructors have been trained, you know, new jobs have been created, and we have even more nurseries. So it's just continuing to grow and just keeps getting stronger and stronger.
Wonderful.
And I'm
Thank you.
here, happy to answer any questions as well during the chat.
This is great, Haley, because one of my biggest my first question I will ask you to answer later on is how can we replicate this project as much as we can, because we know it works. And also the other thing that I did not mention here is that this project also enabled the Bahamas to get high visibility across the developed the source market, because obviously it's something emotionally intense when you have visitors going and doing that. So yeah, so we'll move on now. I have another example about the same dimension again. This is in Union Island in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Essentially, it started because the geckos, a gecko species, special species, was basically the population was diminishing, and so an international organization developed a partnership with the government and the community to address this problem and recreate the habitat for the gecko. And the project, again, the partnership was a huge success. The population increased by 80% in the end. But also they really needed to generate sources of revenues for the different stakeholders involved in this project and the communities on the ground. So they developed new tourism products that were highly successful before Beryl came. So again, Beryl unfortunately destroyed Union Island. And I don't know if we have James on the line, who, if he can give us a brief update on the situation in Union Island and the project. James joined us, James Crockett, he joined us in the previous webinar, and he provided some updates, which actually are very unfortunate. So James is not here today. Okay, so I'll move on, and Eva, let me know if you see him. Other examples, again, of the fourth dimensions that are very inspiring. So this one is from Guyana. The Arapema fish was basically in danger of extinction. And again, bringing together the scientists, the communities. Another cluster initiative was funded by Compete Caribbean to really train the communities into developing this new tourism product called Catch and Release. Sports fishing for that humongous freshwater fish. And it was a huge success because it really enabled the communities to benefit from protecting this endangered species. So again, another huge success. And now here what you see is the first underwater museum and sculpture parks in Grenada that was established. You can see that was actually created after Hurricane Ivan. And the idea was to bring visitors away from the fragile reefs that remain after the hurricane. So that's how the idea came through. So I encourage you, if you go to Grenada, you can also watch the TED Talk, which is very beautiful. Okay, moving on, the fifth dimension, economic empowerment. These examples are from indigenous communities, both in Fiji and Samoa. You can find the detailed stories in the report. But what's interesting is that they've always, since before the 2020s, they've received visitors using the large resorts in their countries, and they were always organizing visits for these visitors, and taking care of their land and showing that to the visitors, but they were basically not generating much revenues. And they came together as a partnership with the government later on to kind of develop different products that would enable combination of different activities that would enable many community stakeholders to benefit from accessing tourism market. And the more they started to engage with their visitors about product development, they also realized that the regenerative tourism is not only powerful for the environment, their land, but also was lucrative. So the results, again, super inspiring. Listen, in this year, they're expecting to generate what they have generated over the past 25 years before these community partnership with the different public and private sector. So it's a huge success. Last one, the dimension about resilience. So this is really about coping with shocks through better planning and risk assessments. But I took here a different sort of example related to sport tourism in the Indian Ocean, because in fact, the Indian Ocean is where the increase in tourism arrivals was the highest over the past decade, and that really damaged the fragile ecosystem big time. So sport tourism emerged as a way to bring visitors away from the coast. And what's interesting in this partnership is that the academics and the academic institutions came together with the different tourism stakeholders and sport tourism and sports stakeholders as well to conduct geospatial assessment. And the geospatial assessment is not only powerful to identify sites for tourism, but also to conduct better environmental risk assessments. So these projects were, these partnerships were great. Obviously, they raised the value of, they illustrated the value of sport tourism in small islands, but more standards need to be established to really make sure that the environment is protected and the communities is benefiting as much as possible. So that brings us to the last part of this report about the recommendations. So the recommendation section is split into two sections. One is about the 5-step process for engaging communities. So you can see that at every step in the process, there are different tools that are available. So Sylvia mentioned before the community-based tourism toolkit that was established, that was created and is made freely accessible to anyone who wants to use it. It's available on the Caribbean Tourism Organization's website as well as Compete Caribbean's website. But what's really interesting is that this toolkit, we Caribbean Tourism Organization train and Compete Caribbean train tourism officers from across the region on the use of this toolkit to mobilize communities and better conduct diagnostic, because these tools are effective to not only to identify priority areas, but to reach consensus. Because when we work with communities, you all know that you have, with the private sector, with the government sectors, there are sometimes diversions in interest or in the way forward. And collecting the data, then what's most powerful to convince stakeholders and agree, reaching consensus on priorities. So I really encourage you to have a look at this toolkit. We have a story in the report that is interesting, because one of the tourism officers we trained on this toolkit used it to develop new cluster initiatives and new community tourism initiative in other parts of the country, and that were really successful. So you can see that it's inspiring. But do we have Larissa McBean online? Because if she's online, I would ask her to share her story. No, she was there again at the last webinar. So you made all these insights from the
see her.
Do you see her? Oh, great, Larissa, we want to hear from you.
Let me give her. Okay, I allowed the mic.
Yay. Go ahead, Larissa.
I'm happy to join again. Also, Janet Harrison Cousins is online. She's the vice president of the cluster. It's the St. Thomas in the East tourism cluster in Jamaica.
Can you speak closer to the mic, Larissa, because we hear from very far away, but we hear you. But yeah, thank you.
Right. So I was saying that Mrs. Janet Harrison Cousins is also online. She's the vice president of the St. Thomas in the East tourism cluster. So she can speak more on it, but briefly, as Annie mentioned, I was trained by Compete Caribbean on the use of the toolkit, and the St. Thomas in the East tourism cluster was the first cluster that I helped to establish in Jamaica. and they are still going since 2019. They have officially registered as a business. They have grown in their membership. And it was basically just the tools that were in that toolkit, along with Jamaica's own toolkit, that were utilized. And with the support of my then employer, Tourism Product Development Company, as well as the community who were open and willing to work together to achieve this. If Janet wants to chime in and say something, that would be great.
Thank you, Larissa. Janet? Are you able to unmute her?
I'm trying to locate her. If she could raise her hand, it would be easier.
Janet, you can raise your hand with the functionality.
That helps. Wonderful.
Oh, she was online, but I don't see her online anymore. Maybe she left. Okay, Annie, you may
No, she's
continue.
there. I
Oh,
see somebody with her hand up.
Yes,
Oh,
I'm
Yes,
here.
Janet
okay.
Harrison.
Great. We hear you, Janet. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I think it is here in England. Good afternoon. How's everyone? I hope you're all well. I'm not sure what you would like me to say about the cluster, other than that it's very successful. Annie, do you want to ask me any specific questions about the cluster?
I think maybe what I really thought was interesting is that you have this referral system where community members that are part of the cluster initiative are benefiting from referral system, and one way to get to each other to get to know each other's business and experience, you actually organize and host meetings at each business location every month. And I think if you can maybe share about how you coordinate among the stakeholders would be interesting.
Yes, well, what we do with the ones that we've already got under the umbrella, we design flyers and we put the invitation on the flyers and we send it out in whichever community that we're going to visit, which would be from one of our stakeholders. So, for example, if we were going to go to Orange Park, one of our members owns that Orange Park and museum, we would then send out flyers in that area and areas and communities that are close enough to that area as well, inviting them to our monthly meeting. And from there, we would explain to them what the cluster is all about and how it will benefit them and help benefit their communities as well, their businesses, of course, and often, showing how we can help grow their employment and how we can network with each other. And that's how we do it. So we go from one person's business to the other and encourage the growth of communities to join us for those meetings, and that's how we do that. And you talked about the that I think you mentioned about the profit sharing for the cluster. Is that what you spoke about first?
Yeah, go ahead. It's interesting.
Yes. Well, what we do is whenever we have a referral. So, for example, if there's a wedding coming we get contacted about a wedding. So, for example, I get contacted for a wedding, and I know that within the cluster we have members who own hotels or venues that would be suitable for a wedding. Instead of going outside, we give that lead to that person who owns the organization. And when they secure the business, what happens is they give 15% of their profit back to the cluster, and that goes into the cluster's bank account. So every time we refer work within the cluster, that's how we help grow our bank account for the cluster. And everybody is in agreement with it.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Janet. I mean, it's a very inspiring story because especially that it was established, like just before COVID, and you had to go through COVID, and like to see that this cluster initiative, without necessarily funding from Compete Caribbean, but with the technical assistance, not necessarily the technical assistance, but with the tourism officer from the government supporting your efforts without much additional funding. Well, actually, eventually the government supported financially, but I just find it's inspiring to see that this cluster initiative has survived, and it's still strong, and it's still going, and it's still helping community members. So congratulations, Janet, on that one. But still, if you can stick around, so if people have questions, they'll be able to join you. So, okay, so moving on, this the policy recommendations. So there are different policy recommendations in the report for each dimension. So obviously, I'm not going to go through all of them with you at this point. But what I just want to say is that it's important for effective public-private community partnership to build capacity at the national level, at the community level, and at the enterprise level. We have seen how important these policies can make a difference at all levels. So concluding here, I want to leave you with a final call to actions. So first of all, the low-hanging fruit. So the OECD's fiscal policy called Model Rules for Reporting by Platforms Operator. So what we found during this research that is very unfortunate is that platforms like Airbnb, which collect taxes on behalf of their host communities, and then they give it to the governments, they have distributed $10 billion across the world since they've started. But all they need is to see the countries implementing this simple OECD rule so that they can start collect and give back to the government. So if they are government officials in this room, I think it would be interesting to consider implementing, because Costa Rica, just like few months after they have implemented this rule, immediately Airbnb started to collect and disburse 1.5 million in a few months to the country. So it's interesting. And then finally, establish a development fund for public-private community partnerships. So obviously, if we have more taxes collected for tourism, community tourism, then we can invest in a fund for public-private community partnership. Because look, if you read this report, you will see that we know how to make it work. We know how to have MSMEs to benefit from the tourism value chain. But there are a lot of things that needs to be done to get to succeed. And we just know how. We just need more fund to expand. So I'll stop here, and I will ask Jordan Hamilton, if the other researcher on this report, if he has anything else to add, and then I will open up for question and answer if we have time. Thank you.
Lovely presentation, Annie. Nothing to add at this time, but I'm very happy to chime in during the questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Jordan. So over to you, Mr. Damien.
Thank you so much, Annie. Again, yeah, such a great and really inspiring presentation as well. Thanks to Maisie, Haley, Larissa, and Janet as well for coming online and sharing your stories and experience. So now I think we have the good news is we have some time to open up the floor to take on board some questions and comments from participants. If you could please use the raise hand function, and then we can hand over the mic to you. While folks are thinking of the questions, we actually have one in the chat. This is from Danae Hines, and the question is, understanding a few of these projects, how have they been affected by Beryl? What are the resilience mechanisms that have been implemented to allow them to rebuild and re-engage? I'm not sure who the question is for directly, but Annie or others, feel free to take that one.
Yeah, well, Eleanor, do you want to speak specifically to that? Yeah, I mean, the last webinar we had, Damien, we had some stakeholders from the affected community who were part of the webinar and were explaining what they're trying to do now. But the relief efforts are on the way. But most of what is very unfortunate that sometimes, like in Union Island, for example, everything has been, like, all the efforts, all the success has been destroyed essentially by the hurricane. So everything has to be restarted from scratch. But I don't know if they are, because I had invited some stakeholders to explain specifically efforts that are on the way. So if we can contribute and support. So if there are someone who wants to specifically mention, that would be great to hear. I see Amanda, Shigon, Eva, you can unmute them.
Yeah.
Macy, Shigon.
Yeah, they should be unmuted.
So Shigon, I think you were the first
Everyone
one.
with their hands up have their mics enabled. So
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Macy.
Okay. No, I was in Treasure Beach actually just before, the day before Hurricane Beryl hit. I was working there on another project, as I said, and I'm very close to Jason Hensel, who would have been here today, but I know he is very busy trying to rebuild his community at the moment after Beryl, and his own business was very badly affected. But I was really pleased to hear that the DMO, the members of the DMO, got together again and to help the community and people because there was nothing really. There was no water, no electricity, no internet, and just coordinating efforts on aids that's been coming in and that kind of thing. So that was really good to hear after nearly 8 years, I think, of setting up the DMO in Treasure Beach. And I think this is going to really galvanize their efforts again to get together and work together.
Thank you very much, Macy. I appreciate your insights. Shigan Holder, you want to speak? You can unmute yourself. We cannot hear you, Shigan.
It looks like he is unmuted.
Yeah, but we cannot hear.
Must be something on the end. Maybe you have to allow your camera. Sorry, mic.
So maybe in the meantime, Norma, I see you have your hand raised as well. You wanted to comment on this specifically? You need to unmute yourself, Norma. We cannot hear you. Not working. Eva, can you unmute Norma, or is she on mute?
No, she has to do it herself.
Sometimes it's not allowing.
She has speaking rights.
Sorry, but I'm unmuted now. My apologies.
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent presentation and very interesting insights from various communities across the Caribbean and other SIDS. And it really highlights what happens when people come together and you're able to pull people together. But I think also some of the biggest learnings come from the things that make it difficult for people to come together. And I was wondering, what are the learnings that you have taken away where when communities don't pull together, when people don't seem to see the potential of this, what are some of the strategies that you would recommend to get people understanding the value of this process?
Very good question, Norma. Thank you so much for asking it. That's key. That's critical. And you see that's in the recommendation section about the process, the 5-step process to engage the communities. This is where it starts. Initially, it's very critical to go out there and engage with the community and get their voice heard. And when we say the community, it's not one person, right? In the communities, you have diverse stakeholders. So it's very important to consult with different stakeholders and get different perspective. And when you understand from their perspective how they see it, what is their vision, it's a lot easier than to assemble the different perspectives together into a common vision because you understand the different perspectives. So that's the first step, is to understand and get their voice heard. And then, as I said, there are different tools. Like, for example, the dynastic tool is a tool that is developed specifically for communities to understand where they stand at the moment. So when you look at the dynastic tool and you know what are the different aspects of their communities, their governance structure, their way of interacting together, that helps you to understand, okay, well, what should be the priorities then, because this is where they are. Also, there's a tool called the asset inventory, and the tourism asset inventory allows community to collect data on what they have, and not just physical assets, but also intangible assets? Do they have storytellers in the community that could potentially be involved in designing a new product and activity? Do they have great chefs in the community that could be engaged and involved in designing new tourism products? So these tools allows the communities to really make sure that as many people as possible can benefit, keeping the authenticity of the local communities, and that's definitely ways of engaging. But that being said, it doesn't mean it's not challenging, because we have, if you read in the case studies, a lot of some of them I've actually captured the challenges, because sometimes people don't agree, and so how do you facilitate the process of eventually going over the bottlenecks and getting people to come together? And you'll see in the case studies some examples are provided. So I'll stop
And I
here.
think that links into the importance of that facilitation role on the people who are developing that. And very often people don't understand that critical role of the facilitation, change management, changing people's perspectives so that they can see the potential of something. Thank you very much for sharing.
That is absolutely true. And most of all the cluster initiatives that Compete has funded, that is the first thing that is always done. Identify a facilitator that has strong facilitation skills, that is trusted in the community. So, for example, Larissa and Jennifer, and my setting, we're talking about the cluster initiative in the East. Larissa was trusted in the community. When she came in and she mobilized the stakeholders, she was trusted. And that's really critical initially to mobilize interest from the stakeholders. I see, Shigan, were you able to unmute yourself? Can we hear you? No? No luck. We can't hear you. Maybe you can make your comment in the chat.
Hi, good morning.
Robin?
Hi, good morning. I am Jolene from Tourism Planner in Anguilla. We have recently started to focus more on community-based tourism. We had at least one major stakeholder meeting, and there are a lot of activities in the pipeline to help drive Anguilla as a community-based tourism destination as well. I was just wondering if there are any opportunities for financing or support where someone can probably come to provide some sort of training to the persons within our community through the development of business plans, sustainable businesses, as there are a lot of projects coming on stream, and it is important that these processes are streamlined. Our community, they usually are very receptive, and we usually get a terrific buy-in from them. So inquiring about financing opportunities and other support.
Yeah, perhaps maybe that's a good time, Sylvia, to turn over to you if you can answer that question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jolene, for your question. Unfortunately, so who are the funders of Compete Caribbean? It's the Inter-American Development Bank, the United Kingdom's Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office, the Caribbean Development Bank, and the Government of Canada. And Anguilla is not part of the 13 countries that we cover, but certainly the United Kingdom in their Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office have a separate program that finances these territories, and I can certainly relay your interest to them. I was also thinking, and just a question posed to the crowd, would it not be interesting to have kind of like a WhatsApp group of people that are working on these models, a network that can exchange experiences about how to approach common difficulties that we've seen come up in these models, because that would be hugely helpful, I think, Jolene, for what you're attempting at doing. And I think that there could be a cross-pollination of super interesting practices. I mean, I was really amazed at what the East Thomas cluster has been able to do in terms of raising financing to keep the cluster activities going, and that's super important. Annie, since you invited me, I just want to make a little mention on Norma's question, which was very, very important. This is a very labor-intensive work. Somebody really has to be paid who is a cluster facilitator to get this off the ground. And what's really important also, and Macy will tell you this, I mean, the Treasure Beach cluster, at the beginning, there was a lot of mistrust. There was a local champion who was Jason Hensel, but everybody else in the community did not believe in the project. And we actually have to divide the project in two. The first phase was, get buy-in. And if we got buy-in, then we would go and develop the products that would benefit the whole community. So that buy-in is super important, and Macy did an excellent job of getting that buy-in in a very difficult situation. So you should all really turn to Macy, of what she did to turn that around. But also, I do want to say that what's also super important is that the cluster finance activities that benefit everyone. Because and these are what one calls public goods or club goods, that's very important to raise trust. Because when we initially come to these cluster projects, a lot of the mistrust is like, who's getting the money? We know that, 400,000 have been approved. Who's getting what, right? And then we're like, nobody in particular is getting anything. We are financing these things that are going to benefit the whole community. And that's when people start to buy in, right? And that's when the distrust starts to reduce, okay? But you have to have a really strong facilitator on the ground, such as Macy, Larissa, others that are here, and also a champion. I mean, within the cluster, there has to be 1, 2 champions that really have this vision and want to propel it forward. Okay.
Okay. Another thing, we're also interested in having an expert in community-based tourism. Ideally, we were looking at someone from the region, but it doesn't exclude persons outside of the region. To sort of later in the year, to have a training or a business plan session targeted at those smaller businesses that has been involved in community tourism. So
the Caribbean Tourism Organization has the specialists in house, and they have been trained on the toolkit. So maybe that's a good segue to transfer to Amanda from CTO, who can perhaps answer how the CTO can help.
So I'll reach out to Amanda, and thank you. I used the toolkit as well when we were delivering our first meeting with the stakeholder, and it was extremely helpful. So thank you.
Great. Is this a good time for Amanda?
Sure. So really, really pleased to hear the thrust to support community-based tourism development in Anguilla. And certainly we can have a conversation offline, Robin. And the idea is in terms of utilizing the toolkit, and more importantly, the research, which really provides a framework for stakeholder engagement, product development, and essentially, how do we strengthen then a network for public, private, and community partnership? So the research done by Annie includes some templates that you can use. I think we CTO are certainly happy to, hold your hand and support this. And I think ultimately Annie would have made mention of the CBT toolkit, and utilizing this resource can help communities really develop and package the product and experience, and ultimately utilize it in their own resource mobilization efforts. And there are recommendations we've identified as well, some potential donors that can be outreached to support resource mobilization. And we also have trainers that can support what it is that Anguilla has done. We can begin, for example, by supporting you to jointly host information and awareness sessions. We've done that in Antigua, Trinidad, and of course that is at no cost because we have the in-house capacity to support at the onset. So for other CTO member countries, feel free to reach out. Of course, I will share a little more at the closing, which is when I'm really I really have an intervention. I just wanted to share as well that I'm recently back from, well, both Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines to support the post-disaster impact assessments on the tourism sector. And I visited Union Island, which, as Annie would have mentioned, was really devastated by burial. And it is heartbreaking that this prized, pristine, one of the healthiest forests undisturbed in the region has been decimated. From experience in Dominica and the Bahamas that also faced devastating Category 5 hurricanes, nature revitalizes itself. So with time, certainly the forest will rebound. There is a community-based NGO, the Environmental Alliance, I think, of the Chatham Forest, which is what it's called. And they are working with the government, and will also mobilize other members of the community in the way forward to replant and garner support for the work that needs to be done to assist the process of revitalizing the forest. It served as a iconic, well, it's a key biodiversity area, and as a tourism asset, persons went for bird watching and rewilding, right, in terms of a forest immersive experience. So that is the experience, that is the update as it relates to Union Island. And certainly as well, Grenada is working with the affected communities, which is Carriacou and Petite Martinique, again, assessing the impacts to the tourism sector broadly and jointly devising a way forward. So I think given our joint efforts in promoting public, private, and community partnerships in the thrust towards recovery, governments have identified this as a key strategy moving forward. Thank you.
I see Raquel Trinidad has been waiting patiently. Maybe perhaps a final comment question from you, and then we can then move on to close. Thanks.
Yes, morning to all, maybe some good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. I put my question in the comment box. My thing is that I'm now responsible at the moment for organizing some focus group sessions, pre-conference sessions leading to a conference in September this year. My personal opinion about what we are doing right now is everybody is agreeing on we need to move on to the growth that we are experiencing at the moment in Curacao, because many tourists are coming into the island. We foresee that by the end of the year we will reach more than 700,000 tourists. That is for us a history. We have never reached that number of tourists before. But our thing is we need to have everybody to move in a sustainable way to keep developing our tourism. And this conference is leading us to have some final resolutions, that those resolutions are being converted into specific actions, right? But my thing is, why or what are the strategies or what can you suggest that people indeed follow what we are going to do? For example, if we agree that we have 10 actions or maybe 20 actions, how do we get everybody together to walk the talk so we can continue growing tourism? Because tourism is now the main pillar for the economy, because our refinery is closed, offshore is not doing as well because we don't have that much offshore banks on the island. So tourism is the thing that generated income. Last year, we generated 1.7 billion guilders, which is about more than $1 billion actually. But still, the government need to collect tax money from it. But our thing is, we need to have the community, considering that more than 60 different cultures living on the island. We are very diverse. many people from Dominican, from Haiti, Jamaica, Republic, and the Netherlands. Everybody's coming to live in the island, but everybody needs to walk the talk.
Yes, but
so
Raquel,
that we
Raquel,
can-
just if I may suggest to address specifically what you said, like how do you get them to see the value of walking the talk, working together? And if you look
the value
in the report, you will
actually
see
what
there's
it is
the
for
one
me.
way to do that is yes. So exactly, precisely. So there's a research on the there's a research that Compete Caribbean funded in the past about assessing the willingness to pay for products and services that can be offered by Caribbean MSMEs in particular. So this research is very comprehensive. It was done in the source market in the United States, the main source market for the Caribbean region, and it was assessing, okay, well, the visitors, are they willing to pay for how much are they willing to pay for a traditional offer in a community setting? And they found that visitors are willing to pay up to $100 for a meal that is offered, but currently they're paying is $10. So when you bring the community together and you have a focus group and you have a workshop with the community and you say, look, if you were to do this and this and this, then you can get $100 per head who are visiting your community. But we just need to combine. Sometimes visitors are interested in making sure that the part of their price they're paying is going back to the community. Simple thing that demonstrating to the visitors that this is happening. Visitors are interested in learning that the ingredients of their meal is actually sourced locally and it doesn't use a bunch of pesticides. So there's certain things like also adding to, let's say, the transport to bring the visitors to the community. So the research, the market research can help MSMEs understand that we're leaving money on the table at the moment. If we put ourselves together, we actually can generate a lot more revenues for ourselves. So I would really encourage you to look at this consumer research.
Perhaps we can let her finish, though. I'm not sure what direction she was leaning towards with the question, but it would be valuable to just finalize the question as it relates to your main challenge in mobilizing these stakeholders and getting them to agree on a common goal as it relates to community-based tourism. So if you can, share light on what you were trying to express, that would be useful. Thank you.
The question is for me?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, we are not that much focused on community-based tourism. We tried in the past. We hired this lady called Judy Karwaki. A few did the community-based tourism project, not much. But our thing is actually, look, we need to start mobilizing people so they need to understand the importance about tourism. They don't, because Curaçao is becoming very, very expensive the last few years, right after the COVID. The cost of living is very, very high. To buy a house, you can buy a small house for a very high price. But the thing is, people need to realize that this is what we need to work on to get more income because it needs to benefit the country. If it's benefiting the country, it's benefiting the resident. My thing is what strategies can we implement to have residents walk the talk when we say, okay, this is what is important for our people. This is what we have to work on together to have people to walk the talk and to reach what we have to reach at the end, because that's important for us. Despite of the fact that some people might not see the benefits, because not everybody see the benefits. That's true, because I understand that, but most people need to see it. People that has money see it because they want to earn more money, but people with less money don't see it, and people with low education don't see it either. We need to have some strategy or strategize in some way that stimulate people to move together with us to see all the benefits. That's what I'm asking. What strategies do we have to use in that respect?
Thank you for that question. I would say from working with various member countries, consultation is so important. Consultation so that they can have input into whatever it is, the final product or experience that Suriname as a destination would like to focus on in the area of tourism or community-based tourism. That has been very successful in our other destinations, and I see Candice Phillips from Guyana. I see colleagues from Trinidad and Tobago. And we also have our project manager who has been supporting clusters in Belize, the Bahamas, and Dominica. And a common challenge, it's not unique to Suriname, is getting the buy-in from the community and agreement on a common goal. I think the value as regional organizations that we can offer is to facilitate the linkages for the exchange of best practice between, for example, Guyana and Suriname that have very much of a similar product, that are perhaps at the same level in terms of tourism development and community engagement. And I think our colleagues from Guyana can really shed light in terms of these were our challenges and these were the strategies that we used to mitigate those challenges and get everyone on board, and created the buy-in for the tourism product or initiative. So I really hope that is helpful. I would invite Candice from Guyana if she's willing to share any insights. We also have Brian, who can provide a holistic sort of overview of our efforts across the Bahamas, Belize, and Dominica. I noticed Crystal Bethel from the Bahamas was also in the room. And again, this is a platform for the exchange of experiences among countries, among the destinations, among communities that own the product, that have to work with the community with the aim of expanding, the benefits of tourism to those communities. So I would invite any colleagues, if you're interested in adding to the discussion and shedding some light as it relates to strategies to Suriname, to kindly raise your hand and we will promote you for you to be able to contribute to the discussion.
Amanda, I have to leave now, so I cannot give speaking rights afterwards once I leave. So just a heads up to everyone. I have another meeting to attend, which I'm quite late for.
Okay, Robin Williams. I can facilitate.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning again. So just shedding some light, one of the issues that we faced in Angola from the ministry through consultations was that everyone consultation process is important and is of utmost importance. So by doing this, persons were getting a bit wary of the different consultations for tourism, consultations for social development, health, roadworks, everything. So what we did in our most recent consultation for community-based tourism, and also through community-based tourism, we also establishing a volunteerism component. So what we did, we got most of the more of the government departments involved, because a lot of times they do not know the important role that they play in tourism. For example, when we had immigration involved, then they would have shared some successes and some losses, within the tourism sector, people traveling in and out of the country, the risk associated with it, with volunteerism not being streamlined, etc. So we got different government departments involved and let them all understand that they contribute to the overall tourism goal. And from that, communication have been a bit more freely in terms of getting feedback, recommendations, people attending meeting. For the consultations with the public sector, we are now looking at exploring village tourism. So in each village, there are already a nonprofit organization that's leading a lot of tourism offerings on island. And what we're going to do now, instead of reinventing the wheel, we are looking at ways to strengthen those villages tourism groups, village tourism groups, where they can be more formalized and we can support them better, because then they are the champions of their village. So they will be leading the different community work within their village, and by that, other persons from the community will join and come along. So we're looking at strengthening what's already there and empowerment.
Okay, if I may speak, if I heard correctly, I think what I could capture is like, do you hear me?
Yes, I am.
Yes. What I could capture is like Amanda says something about a vision. I think we need to create a vision. Somebody says something about a vision, okay? And Jolene, you said something about a goal. Most probably, I think what we should focus on or maybe put attention on is like, we need to come with a common vision for every stakeholders, because the community, in my vision, is the biggest stakeholder. Everybody in the community needs to see, even if you are in public service, even if you are a hotelier, tour operator, doesn't matter what position you have in the community. I think we need to focus on a vision that everybody involved need to design a vision that everybody feels comfortable with. And also from that vision, you need to craft a goal that everybody says, this is, I feel myself comfortable and committed to do, if I understood correctly, Amanda and Jolene. Because sometimes we have done many efforts with regards to tourism. And nowadays people are complaining because there are many constructions going on. Curacao is a very tiny island. Our population is not even 150,000 people, but it's very dispersed and there are very opinions, and people need that. Tourism is like something that doesn't feel comfortable with it, because there are many tourists on the island. Restaurants are becoming more expensive. Supermarkets are becoming more expensive because the tourists are willing to pay more, and automatically owners are increasing their prices. But we need to let people see that this is something we can do together, because if there is something that people need to work on, especially the government, is like, how are we going to cope with the increase in prices? Because that's how it's functioning. Because of the people are demanding and because people are requiring certain things, prices are becoming higher. But we need to have people, I don't know, something that I might seem a little bit desperate about the topic, but we need to have something. I don't know if I call it the magic stick, for example, like designing a vision and a goal so people can do something that together we can go and see something very positive for the island. And automatically something says about volunteerism consultation. I call it a volunteerism consultation group, where people also express their concern about the growth of tourism in Curacao, because if we do not do something right now, it's going to have negative consequences for the island. That's my piece of information I had. Everybody's now quiet because it's a big concern on the island right now.
No, but these are all good points, Raquel. Thank you for your intervention. But just to say that everything that you said is also included in the report. So you all said preaching what we have found in the research as well. So this is great.
Can I ask a question? I think I'm finally off of mute. It's Shegu. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yes.
I'm going to keep it very short. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for the report and the efforts to support the region and tourism. I guess I wanted to ask, have we considered remote work as an opportunity and to redefine tourism broader than just visitors? There are many people who are from the region who vacation for a week or two who would love to spend a lot more time. There are people who, with remote work, would like to spend months rather than days or weeks. And in many cases, they want to have these experiences in communities that we describe. and they want to attach to the stories that if you can spend a month, you can slowly introduce yourself. And I do think that there's an opportunity to do that. You talked about Airbnb earlier on. I would argue took it from, I'm from Guyana, I should say, born in England, live in New York, but grew up in Guyana. It took it from a few hotels to many different Airbnbs in many different communities. And I grew up in Region 10, which is the middle of the country. I think me pitching my own story, we're building an Airbnb of unreasonable workplaces, which allows people to work in these communities, to embrace those stories, to build community. And the sense is going beyond just I'm on a beach or whatever the version is, to really engaging in different ways. And there are many stories that you can engage with if you go beyond. And I do think, and this is my last point before Airbnb was started in California, but their first real traction happened in Brooklyn around Labor Day. It was 2003 when there was a housing crisis. 1 million plus people come for Labor Day Carnival, and there's no hotels in central Brooklyn. They lived by friends and family, cousins, aunts. Anyone from the Caribbean knows the story. And that became what became Airbnb. My sense is we as a community can do the same to lead this effort where people don't go, I'm using Guyana as a reference, just to Georgetown and the oil industry development, but throughout the 10 regions of the country and throughout the many islands that make our region the strength. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for your intervention. Again, I really appreciate your point. Again, you're like raising issues that are in the report. You will see even some quantification of the value that that digital nomads bring to the region, with an estimate of a case study in Barbados. So making the case that actually they're adding a lot more value to communities than, say, what cruise ship visitors, because they spend more and they are interested in trying products and services offered by community organizations as well. So I take your point, and I agree 100%. I encourage you to look at the report.
I thank you. I did look at the report. I guess encourage you to take it broad, because digital nomads are visitors. I'll give a practical example. My brother's at Google. He just has his first child. He's moving back to the Caribbean. He's moving to an island. He's going to live there. He's going to still work for Google. He doesn't have an office in the island. He wants to help train kids so they can work for Google as a programmer. He wants to engage the kids in these countries, which he considers home. He wants his child to grow up in the Caribbean. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands in London and New York. I've lived in both cities who will do that. And they will engage the communities of Suriname and Curacao in a way that's natural, because that's where they grew up. So my sense is this is an opportunity. I call them digital migrants versus digital nomads, which includes both groups. They can afford some friction because that's what makes it unique. Eating a coconut from the whatever, and whatever the things that we consider normal is the way that makes it unique. And my point is, I think as a beautiful place with great stories and hospitality, work is a place where I'm a real estate investor. People used to pay thousands of dollars for a square foot for rent. Some of that money can be allocated, and that creates a revenue source beyond my vacation budget in our regions. This is early. I'm talking sort of crazy stories, but I would just think about how do we encourage, because I'm trying to build this app to facilitate this. I guess I'm asking, how do I engage all these people on this call so we can incrementally test? We're starting in Brooklyn. We want to be in the Caribbean next year. How do we do that? I don't own a major hotel, and so that's what I'm trying to do, building on the report and all the great efforts Annie and Jordan have done.
Everyone, I think we're getting, well, we've passed the point of closing, but I think the discussion is very much ongoing, and it certainly doesn't end here. So from our side, from the UN side, I think there's clearly a call from many of you that you want to be able to connect with each other. So I'll speak with my colleague Eva Marie after this webinar, and we can perhaps push out a call for interest if you want to share your contact details with those who are participating in the webinar. And likewise, then whoever shares their details and wants to connect, we can then present or provide you with everyone's contacts so you can also continue this discussion because it's such an important one. Maybe just a couple of quick points from our side before I hand over to Amanda. She's going to give us closing remarks. In terms of the SIDS Global Business Network and the forum that we organize every 2 years, just a really big thank you to everyone for your partnership, for your engagement, and for us, sustainable tourism has been a key thematic area of our work with the forum essentially since day one when we started this work back in 2014 at the previous SIDS conference. So we're really excited by the fact that this conversation is still happening, that there's a lot of momentum behind it as well. So thank you to everyone for continuing to engage. I know Eva-Marie has left the call, but I just wanted to also say a big thanks to her because she's the one who's been doing a lot of the work to bring everybody together. So with those few sort of remarks from our side, let me hand over to Amanda Charles to close us out.
Thank you very much, Damien, Mr. Sass. And it's so funny that I see persons still joining the webinar, but indeed we've had a rich discussion. And it is an opportune point at which to conclude just with some thanks and recognition of this important work, important and I think very pioneering research. And I think we can all agree that this is a first step, and perhaps the next step is to break down each of the 6 areas that Annie have identified in the research and support member countries, certainly from the point of view of the Caribbean Tourism Organization and also perhaps the beneficiary countries or the countries that can benefit from opportunities available for the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility. So on behalf of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, I extend thanks and commend the United Nations Office of the High Representative for least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, UNOHRLLS, in particular the SEEDS program, for spearheading the groundbreaking research on effective public-private community partnerships in tourism. This initiative is pivotal in the desire to expand the participation and benefits in tourism to local communities, also to diversify and enhance the regional tourism product, and ultimately contribute to the sustainable and inclusive development of small island developing states. To Sylvia and the team at the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility, we are extremely grateful for the collaboration and financial assistance which made the research possible. I also recognize the contribution of stakeholders in the 3 primary SEEDS region, the Caribbean, Asia Pacific, and the Africa regions. And Annie would have spoken to persons that she engaged with who contributed their time and expertise. And in that regard, I also recognize the leadership role of the CTO, certainly, but also the Pacific Tourism Organization and the African Sustainable Tourism Organization in mobilizing the various stakeholders across the 3 regions. I would like to profoundly commend Miss Annie Bertrand, partnership expert, lead author on this research, and her colleague, Mr. Jordan Hamilton, research analyst, for a comprehensive and very insightful study. The study offers a wealth of best practices for public, private, and community partnerships in SEEDS, and proposes a framework as a blueprint for success. This framework, the PPCP, Public, Private, and Community Partnership Framework, identifies 16 drivers of success along 6 dimensions, and she would have touched on this: social empowerment, digital inclusion and innovation, governance and financing, the environment and biodiversity conservation, and economic resilience, economic empowerment rather, and resilience. The research includes case studies from each of the SEEDS region to illustrate how the 6 dimensions can be used and have been used to create and realize value for communities. So I encourage you all to download the report, which is available from the Compete Caribbean website, the CTO, and the UN SEEDS Global Business Network website. We, as a part of follow-up to this webinar, we will also circulate the link to download the research. I also encourage all stakeholders to consider implementing the recommendations. And again, there are specific tools and templates to facilitate stakeholder engagement. In concluding, I think I was very encouraged by the remarks of Howard Ambrose in the chat. And he mentioned that the inclusion of beneficiaries, stakeholder consultations, capacity building, and monitoring of progress, especially in the initial stages of community-based tourism development, are imperative to obtain and sustain buy-in. So I would leave this as the blueprint, public, private, and community engagement and partnerships as the new model for a sustainable and resilient approach to tourism and community tourism development. It would be remiss of me not to mention the devastation caused by Hurricane Beryl to the community of Treasure Beach in Jamaica. They call themselves the home of community-based tourism, as well as the territories, of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Grenadine Islands, in particular, Union Island and Mairo, and of course, Grenada with the Grenadine Islands of Carriacou and Petite Martinique being impacted. Our hearts goes out to you. And of course, we stand in solidarity as a Caribbean community. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and stay tuned as we try to ventilate and dissect the research to make it even more implementable. And of course, as regional organizations, certainly the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the Compete Caribbean Partnership Facility, the work of the UN as they look to implement the ABAS framework, which stemmed from the 4th International Conference on Small Island Developing States. We remain committed to supporting individually and collectively in our respective regions the sustainable social and economic growth. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much, everybody.